This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 486 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner. And through this special episode produced in partnership with Brightly Software, we're going to talk about efficiency, managing assets in your brewery, proactive and preventative approaches that extend the lifespan of your equipment and reduce equipment downtime. There's more data available to you as a brewer than ever before, but understanding how to use that data to make smart decisions and anticipate issues before they happen can save you money and avoid costly downtime. Through this episode, we'll talk about some of the more common issues that breweries deal with, some of those warning signs, some of the things that you can do, and then, of course, ways to apply technology today in a way that is going to save you money in the long run. Like I said, this is brought to you by Brightly Software, a Siemens company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. They help organizations manage their assets, facilities, and infrastructure through their entire lifespan. For over 25 years, Brightly Software has been the global leader in intelligent cloud-based asset management solutions with excellent training, support, and services. Over 12,000 clients globally rely on Brightly to improve their team's operations and planning. Joining me for this episode are Bobby Cole, President and CEO of Think-PLC, located in Lexington, North Carolina. They offer control system solutions, and for industrial automation, they cover design, build, installation, and support. Welcome to the podcast, Bobby.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. Can't wait to pick your brain on this. And also joining us are Corey Dickens, Principal Solutions Consultant for Manufacturing at Brightly Software. You bring a decade of hands-on wrenching experience from the Navy to textile industry and more. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've done everything except for brew beer, but that's the beauty, right? Y'all have y'all's strengths, I have mine, and we come together and figure out ways to make it work.
Hey man, manufacturing is manufacturing in this beverage business. A lot of the equipment is, common among things. And so, but you guys know a thing or two about this. And, Bobby, tell me a little bit about Think-PLC. You work on integration, primarily in this, but explain to everybody what you actually do.
Yeah, so we're at the core, we're control system experts. So if you see all those wires and those junction boxes and the control boxes making the pump spin and things happening, that's what we lean towards. That's our thing. Don't brew beer, avid consumer. So, jokingly aside, like we're in multiple different industries, everything from cruise ships to breweries. If you go on a Krispy Kreme donut location around the world, you'll see my electrical control panels running that machine. So we're pretty agnostic. We're control specialists.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. And Corey, tell us a little bit about Brightly and the work that you do there.
I know about Brightly, but there's only two types of, 5K runs I do. One is a Krispy Kreme challenge in Raleigh, and the other one's a beer mile. So put both of them together, probably not a good recipe for success. Again, like Bobby, I kind of do anything industrial, right? So if you take a controls package that Bobby may or may not have had his hands on, right? If you get his stuff, probably better. But, and then you wire that up to equipment, that equipment needs some level of service, right? And that for brewers, that tends to be the brewer. And then as they start scaling and they start adopting a manufacturing business model, you have to build SOPs and build processes and systems. And one of those systems that'll come back to bite you in the butt, if you're not on top of it, is the maintenance. Are you maintaining things? Or are you in this constant state of repairing and you don't know, you can't manage your money? There's this black hole of spending. You don't really know where it's going, right? You kind of lose the ability to lead a business. You let the business manage you. So that's what we do. Again, the software, I've implemented software like this. I've been in places where I didn't have it. The practice is the same. The software just makes it a lot easier.
For sure, for sure. If I can think about that worst case scenario as a brewery, that worst case scenario is stuff breaking and the brewery being down, especially at a key time when your distributors, your vendors are asking for that beer, and you can't make it and you cannot deliver to them. And so maintaining that equipment, keeping an eye on things, but I should say it's even more than that. What you guys are now working on, Corey, is trying to be proactive and preventative about that, and using modern technology and some AI integration to not just respond, but also predict. Talk a little bit about how you understand, life cycles of some of these equipments, or even some of those warning signs that start to pop up that that by using an integrated software system you can catch before they start to metastasize into bigger issues.
You stole my word. I really like that word, metastasize. And you go back 60 years, computerized maintenance management systems, right? That's the category that we're in. 60 years ago, they weren't computerized. They were a punch card system, right? And that was the accountability aspect, or things getting done, blah, 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 turned into mainframes, DOS-based, et cetera, right? The foundation is still relevant. You still must have people assigned and employed in doing certain tasks, and an accountability for a audit perspective, right? Lord forbid there be a compliance issue or a quality issue that goes out, and you need full traceability back to what happened and why did it happen, right? Root cause analysis is a business. But then you look at the technology, and it's just like all of us have Apple Watches, right? What did Apple Watches do? They're not a full EKG machine that you get wired up to at a hospital, right? That's a precision instrument. It's calibrated. You got to pay a lot of money in the American healthcare system to get access to one of those. But the Apple Watch is something where you can run simple diagnostics on yourself, right? And what is it giving? It's telling you got to get up and walk around. So the question is, like, how do we offer something? We're not selling Apple Watches, by the way. But how can we tap into data that's available at a reduced cost point, or lowering the barrier to entry, so you don't have to be a Boston Beer Company or a Molson Coors to get access to some of this information? Your equipment is telling you something. You may already have the instrumentation and the data available. How do you get that into a system which can do that math better and faster and probably more accurate than a human, especially me? And then let me go fix it before it's a big problem. So we talk about margins, and that's a big thing, making sure you have the beer for your distributor so it stays on the shelf, because those stores will change you out very quickly of placement if you can't keep it full. And then how do you manage that margin proactively? And it all starts with your practices.
Sure. So Bobby, if I think about this from you can think about different scales. I was just out at the Sierra Nevada and Firestone Walker breweries last week. And, at that scale, when you're making 600,000 plus barrels, there's immense amount of automation at play, large valve farms moving, allow you to move all sorts of beer from one place to another and, manage all of those tasks. But that's an unusual case in the bigger brewery world. On a smaller brewery side, what are some of the most common kinds of integrations that, I obviously, the actual brew house operations tend to be, a range of programmable, automated or semi-automated to fully manual. But then obviously, then into the cellar and, side of things, being able to monitor temperature, pressure, et cetera. What are some of the most common kind of entry, integrations that you start to see that start to deliver information that brewers can make more smart decisions about?
Like Corey said, the data is usually already there. We're not having to add additional parasitic sensors and things. Used to, it was with these systems, it was the big conversation of, do I have to upgrade all my control system? And gosh, what's that going to cost? The data is there. We have the access to tap into it now, so you can use it. Usually what we're talking to folks about is data fatigue at this point. There's so much data, they don't even know what to do with it. So we're counseling. It's almost like a therapy session on, here's the points that really matter to you and what can you do with it. And as the integration person that's actually boots on the ground, connecting wires and getting it to the cloud, we're having to help be that champion of what you can do once you have everything. If you think about a lot of, to your point, the big guys, they've got these integrated systems. It was thought through, engineered, planned, installed, connects to one big SCADA system. the majority of folks out here, especially probably listen to this podcast, they have bought equipment over the years. It's been pieced together, multiple OEMs. They had to make hard, really life-changing, decisions on purchases to get their family-owned brewery up and going. And that disconnection of systems, they don't talk to each other. That's okay still. But that's typically what we're running across is, you know, um, the heartburn of, do I have to spend, a couple $100,000 to redo all this to be where, these guys are talking about on this podcast? And the answer is no. To Corey's point, you can start small and then it scales up. And that's even with now the Brewhouse control software we're doing. You can start smaller where 10, 15 years ago, the brewery software, the guys that actually had it, where you could strap it in and it would take on that burden instead of being custom written software. It's it's the boundary to entry is actually affordable now. We've got enough users out there. The technology's grown enough to where, this is, anybody listening to this conversation can play a part.
What does that interface and that look like? I mean, in terms of, moving from these kind of, controllers, that are in their own kind of siloed system, and then like getting that data from that controller and then out into, some system that can be integrated and looked at remotely, but also then plugged into, a better kind of modern, AI or driven decision-making framework.
Yeah. Well, it can be done on a handful of ways, and that's usually a site visit, and a lot of counseling. Especially on the smaller scale, folks try to do, they're watching YouTube videos, or, they're trying to do everything themselves to make an educated decision. I do the same thing. I get it. That's where we step in, is laying out the possibilities and then helping them, securely, that's the key word, is securely get that data somewhere. Because now it's so crazy. And with the Cyber Resiliency Act that's passing right now, even more important, where the data that's, flowing out, or maybe both directions back into the brewery if you need, it's, we have to protect that data. And so, what that looks like typically, I tell people, if you need to schedule your operation, you need to sequence and operate the batch, and then you need a report of what it's done. The software fits, and those disjointed systems that existed that probably got your brewery up and going, but doesn't help you plan for distribution. They don't offer that solution that you can offer in like a Brightly bolt-on package or a good control system out of the box.
And these are designed now to work with some of the inbuilt sensors that are already there, that are already, these breweries are already using.
Yeah, absolutely. So, old school means of analog connection, 4 to 20 milliamp loops, all that stuff's still applicable. Have you moved up to an IO link connection with maybe an IFM temp sensor or something like that? Sure, that's fine. You can move up to that level, not necessary. We can still use that old analogous data.
That makes sense. What are some of the, for both of you, what are some of the, kind of like common data points that, that brewers in particular are looking like? What are the decisions that they want this, to help them make, and what, and what are the most kind of, important and, general mainstream, ways that you provide that, that specific data for them?
So it depends, where your pain point is, because it does change, whether it be a centrifuge or a brew house or something. Big one comes up often to me is monitoring carbonation. Typical original brew house systems don't have anything that will do that. And then just did one recently where there was no way to monitor the cooling of the yeast, so they wanted to make sure they didn't crash the yeast in a cider operation. So we were able to do that and alarm so that this successful but small brewery cidery could actually have a life. So the head brewer had to basically live with it. They couldn't trust, other health. They felt like it was so boutique and had to be monitored all the way through. Very manual process. You can start to capture data, and you can start doing things like, looking for major alarm events, like, again, not crashing yeast or cooling it to the point where you do that and stop it before it happens so you don't waste material, as well as you can start to build those processes in so that you can have standardizations and train other people to take over. So if you want to take a weekend off.
And there is something to be said for time in this, right? That the doing it in a precise way and doing, getting exactly where you need to go, but then doing it, faster and being able to make some of those decisions right when they are ready can be a real game changer for breweries.
Well, energy's, the cost of electricity is going crazy, amongst other things, wasting, the water usage. So, if you're running a pump, an extra hour more than you need to, or you're using more water than you should, or your chiller is, hammered all day long when it didn't need to be. Those are sort of things that you can start to get more intelligent on. And obviously 3 years ago, we weren't talking about AI like we are now. And now you can you can pump it in the chat GPT on a spreadsheet and start looking for those holes that us humans can miss. We have tools now in our software hardware where the machine will start to learn. So like on a Krispy Kreme donut machine, you have a bad heater element. It'll still heat. It just takes forever to heat. And so the shop, over time, they just like, it's taking, 2 hours for this fryer to heat up to 365 degrees. It'll actually sit there and learn how long it should take and then set those norms for you, because who's sitting around like monitoring every status situation of the machine? Nobody knows every machine perfectly. So it can sit there and learn while you're asleep and then alert you on those rules you set to say, hey, something's wrong. You might want to check the fryer heater element, or, you might want to check a bad process valve feeding tank 5. That's where we're at. We're there now. And if you're not having that conversation, it's probably just because, you're getting swarmed with thousands of AI startups and getting tied in all this algorithm marketing. You don't even know who to use. You don't want to make the wrong decision and be stuck. That's part of the therapy sessions I mentioned earlier, where we're coaching folks on, best practices.
No, for all of the sky is falling around AI, I think there's some very good use cases for it, and things that, we find ways to use it in our process. It doesn't replace humans, but it makes us, allows us to make smarter decisions. I remember, a few years ago, I was talking to Brian, who was the brewmaster at Deschutes, and now he's out at New Realm. But, he had built a system where just by using kind of predictive modeling of fermentation curves, they were able to cut tank residency time for their beers, predict when they were going to hit final gravity on that. And they were able to, I think, cut tank residency time between like 8 and 12 hours per batch. And when you're doing it at that scale, it's like, that's a humongous amount of savings, so much that they didn't have to commission new tanks to meet some of their production goals. And so, you start looking at just something as simple as cutting 8 hours of tank residency time off. And it can really incredibly, support this. And then if you go from that, where the system, it creates this, this data point where you're like, oh, we should, move that tank now. And you can still manually, confirm that, or if it's on a weekend, and you can just move things forward, like you can build those systems that will keep those things going for you. Corey, you see some of these out there in the beer world.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like the crawl, walk, run here is, back in the day, we would just like wait until it failed, right? And they were like, hey, influence of people from an industrial background are like, you can do simple things, just routines and patterns to prevent this. So for different things, it's just the cycle, right? And the hours of use or whatever it may be, and that's still kind of arbitrarily tracked. Like you mentioned, now, the word predictive maintenance is synonymous to me with like predictive analytics, which is just a model that you build up. And to Bobby's point, this is where we went from tracking cycles to defining very static thresholds. And if it breaks a threshold, we're like, oh, we got to react and do this. And it's like, no, there could be like a reason for this. There's some context that's needed. And that's where AI is the best use, It's just a machine learning algorithm modeling the data over time. And like you said, allowing you to be truly predictive and say, this needs my attention then, like almost pinpointing the time. And for maintenance, we're trying to do that a week in advance. Like we're not perfect and we need data points and we need to get better about it. But, stop doing things just because you were told you need to do it. It's the old school way of doing it. Truly listen to the equipment and follow it in that manner. And I think, like Bobby said, it's just we're getting closer and closer to that. And that's the best use of AI in my mind. That and like sharing knowledge. We talked about YouTube. YouTube was like the first iteration for this generation of like, I can look up anything I need to know from the internet. The funny thing is you have to watch people do it the wrong way. And you're like, aha, I'm not going to do it that way. AI is like, you should do it this way. And it's like, you got to fact check it a little bit. But again, if you bet it into your operations, it's you train it on you and it learns your habits. And like you said, utilization of the tanks, like don't go commission more tanks and vats, like just get better use out of your current. And that even goes down to the grain, right? So you're not wasting batches. You're truly trying to optimize everything every stage.
Sure.
We're starting to see the Copilot-like interfaces too in industrial software, where you have your manuals, like the manufacturer manuals for the valves and the pumps, and even the control system, and you have an alert or a roll situation, alarm situation in the PLC, and you can say, you start to talk. You're now getting to where you can chat with a AI bot, and it's got your data, and you can ask it questions, and it's telling you things. It'll pull up your electrical diagrams, amongst other things. So that's where we've gotten on the main industrial side. A few weeks ago, I was on the stage with Chris Stevens, DI CEO, and we were talking through exactly the conversation where we're going here. And I theorize the use cases for AI in industry is the small guys. The barrier to entry is affordable now, and the big corporate folks, they have processes defined. Nobody wants to mess with something that's not broke. They're not going to be messing with stuff where, the folks that's probably listening to this podcast, they can go tinker. You know why? Because their livelihood's on the line, and they'll try anything to make things better, because especially looking for short-term gains, there's now packages and kits because data to the cloud is very expensive. Like nobody wants to talk about that when they sell time on a server. They want to sell you like nice fancy graphs and stuff. It's expensive. So there are new solutions to that where it makes sense for a small manufacturer, and even a couple guys running a brewery are a small manufacturer. They need to have that mindset. And there's some really cool kitting ways of edge devices. And this leads to like how you mentioned how. So, hardware like edge devices to wire in the data parasitically from the existing control system. So if the pump stops, it wasn't your IoT device didn't take your machine down. That's like the worst case scenario, because it's supposed to just be sitting there monitoring. But now there's barrier to entry is so low and easy to start playing. We see people, they find some pain point, like something, I'll lose this valve breaks more than all the other valves. We know that. So let's go ahead and put in some kind of monitoring device, like a, feedback position sensor, flow meter, whatever you need. And then, get a minimal amount of data started. The number one thing I see people fail at is they try to pump every data point somewhere. And then they're like, oh my gosh, look what that's costing us. And it's not improving our business. So you kind of champion starting small, trying to find somewhere where you can fix a pain point and then move on.
What does that mean then in terms of, because I can see what you're saying. If you want to plug this into, an AI system that is doing like real-time monitoring second by second, now you're talking about a lot of processing, whereas... when temperature changes like a degree every 30 minutes, you don't need that. And we try to counsel people on, they just you get data fatigue after a while, because you're just blasting all this data and you're seeing the cost for it eventually. But instead of that, you can take more intermittent measurement and then, broadcast that out and then use that as the kind of processing base for some of your data decision making.
Absolutely. That's right.
look at pumps in the industrial market. We used to pay people to walk around and they would sample data on a certain gearbox or certain pump, right, once a month, and they would kind of travel between sites and do that, right? Now you can do a relatively inexpensive IoT device or an IO link or just a different protocol to communicate to a gateway, and they can sample the data a little bit more frequently. And now the human can actually sit there and look at the data and say, with the information, with the suggestion, this is my educated opinion, right? And now you put them on a more value add task. I mean, that's the industrial and the sensor side. And to Bobby's point about the fatigue, we see it in maintenance too. People are telling brewers they need to maintain everything in their brewery. It's like, start with the things that'll like make you work on the weekend, right? Talked to Mark Doble a few weeks ago. He was going to get a new pump for the chiller because it went out, right? So like that stops you in your track. If it causes a reaction from you and you have to leave your business in the middle of the day, in the middle of whatever you're doing, it's probably pretty critical. Like, what are you doing for that? And are you planning for contingencies? I don't even tell people you need a preventive maintenance routine on everything. I just want to know, you as a business owner, you as a brewer, you know what to do if something happens and you have a plan.
Sure. The things that, those major things, if you've got beer in tank and can't keep it cold and,
that's kind of a problem.
It's a pretty big problem. Yeah. You're not going to do anything else until, you can keep that beer cold. And, right. There are some things that might delay you starting things, that there are those big problems that will cause you to lose, this ingredient investment that you have made. And, you can certainly prioritize based on what some of those are. Are there, some common, things, Bobby, that you see breweries backing up, in this kind of thing, so that they make sure that they are always, they can maintain that kind of uptime?
Yeah, and I'll do this for my business as well. You look at bottlenecks, like Corey said, the chiller. If you have one chiller on site, and look, maybe that's all you can afford. I completely understand it. You want to look for devices that are a single source bottleneck that stops everything, and a chiller would be a big one. It's things like that. Transfer pumps. People have like one transfer pump on a cart on a VFD. No redundancy. Those are sort of things that we do from a control perspective. Yeah, you've got VFDs on things, but we also add like a bypass contactor solution. So in a no ship moment, you can bypass that VFD and just move product, right? Get it transferred. These things are, if you're not a controls expert, you probably don't even know they exist, but it's the sort of things you need to look at when you lay out your system and you flow your, especially if you go to distribution, they're expecting from pickups, you have a consumer base, single source and thing, you can lose really quick in manufacturing.
Sure. We can't all be Sierra Nevada. I was getting the Ken Grossman tour last Wednesday, and he was talking about how he had this older model of Alpha Laval centrifuge, and over the years at auctions has bought 3 more of them. So he's got 3 backups just sitting in their boneyard, and just in case anything goes wrong.
That tells you everything. That tells you everything. That's how important that is.
Yep. It's how important it is, but it's also the kind of power if you are that person, right? Where Bobby was talking about earlier, like the big dogs, they automated out of innovation. They were trying to lead and experiment, do something cool. The small brewers, like, they can't afford more staff and more headcount, right? It eats into their margins too quickly. So they have to optimize with what they have and try to right size for them. And I think these kind of solutions and lowering the barrier of entry, and like also just listening to podcasts like this and learning from other brewers, like even the big dogs, you can glean a few things and apply that to your business and try it. And, no sweat off your back if it doesn't work, or you're like, yeah, that's no ROI, let's move on.
The smartness of the software now is getting to the point where it can make up for some of the differences in the the kind of source material and the way that those things are coming in.
And it's only going to we're only on like a hockey stick, right? We're on the upward motion of how fast this stuff's going to innovate, which is very dizzying to people in the industry because they're like, I can't keep up with the adoption rate of it. And I think that's unfortunately, it's the point. But you got to pick your shots. Pick what you need to improve, And, talk with someone like Bobby if it's controls, talk with someone like me if it's maintenance, talk with other brewers and get their feelings and their impact. Listen to a few podcast episodes of this podcast specifically, wink, wink, hint, hint.
They're already doing
like,
it.
just talk to, like, that's the thing about AI is it's democratizing information. Doesn't always mean it's the right information. What was the commercial like a decade and a half ago? It was like, they can't put anything on the internet that's not right. Is that where'd you learn that? The internet? So like that's some of these AI bots. So you got to just get out and talk to people. I mean, brewers are best about it. They go to the conferences. They go to Great American Beer Festival. They just get up and they meet and they share secrets and tips and tricks.
Yeah. No, I think you're both right that the key of using this is finding ways to make. Well, let's look at the big picture. The big economic picture is that every year, we need to, people would like to make more money, right? Everyone working in the economy, you have some inflation, you like to make some more money. Well, you achieve that by what? Either lowering your costs, and improving the bottom line of the business so you can put more money into your people, or you do it by raising costs, or you do it by growing and creating more, bigger efficiencies. And so there's a couple different ways, but it's hard to do that, especially in a low margin business like brewing, and so finding ways to be more efficient and being able to do more with the team that you have, rather than because if you scale up that investment and that resource directly with that additional volume, then you're not getting ahead. You're not creating more of that margin that allows you to take care of the people that you're doing. And so finding ways for us to all be more productive, increase that productivity, that's the thing that allows those businesses to push more back into the people and support the people, within that. And so, if we can, make ourselves more productive in that sense, then I think it's ultimately a good thing. And we're not talking about replacing people as much as we are talking about allowing
or reallocating people is what happens for us. We reallocate things you can't automate. We don't displace bodies. Nobody gets laid off when we go upgrade something. We just automate things that should be automated, and we move to, you shouldn't have to stand there and just eyeball a temperature on a single loop controller. Like, you should be able to washing kegs. You know what I mean?
Or we should upskill you, and now you're the controls expert. You're the maintenance person, right? Like that's the thing, is we're upskilling. People don't want to do the mundane, routine task. It's was it the Willy Wonka chocolate factory, right? The grandpa got laid off from sitting there putting the tubes on the toothpaste, right? No, now he's the maintenance person for the robotic system that puts it together, and that's a skill, and that's a more valuable skill to the organization. And you mentioned it just a second ago about the efficiency. One thing that always worries me talking to so many people is they're so obsessed of efficiency that they fail to be effective. And effectiveness is like the first underlying thing. Are the things that we do actually like resulting in the intended outcomes? And then we look for efficiency gains on top. So I'd be mindful of that. Like, just because someone tells you to do maintenance doesn't mean that maintenance actually contributes to ROI. And that's where brewers have to talk to each other. What you talk to some of these more technical brewers, they know exactly what does deliver results and what doesn't, even if it's a outdated, antiquated, or no system at all. Other ones just listen to the talking heads who are like, you need to maintain everything and you need to throw all this money out and buy all the services. And it's like, no, like it's actually a balance between.
I 100% understand what you're saying and agree. I was talking to a brewery, a former brewer who is now on the consulting side, and he was working with they were talking with some German counterparts, and the Germans love measuring everything, right? Then there was something like, we've got 120 different data points of, on this beer as it goes through, through this production process. And they go, yeah, well, how many of those do you actually make decisions based on? And like, yeah, maybe 12,
Yep.
And so, capturing all that data, it's okay. It's just not necessarily that useful if you're only making decisions on 12. And so being able to like visualize, and that in that sense, you both then think about how to like streamline that down and provide actionable information. And also, again, use that a little bit of that AI automation to help cut through some of the noise of that data and bring focus to the things that actually just might, that will more likely make a difference.
Yep. What I love about the brewing business and the whole industry is you guys talk to each other. Unlike other industries, you don't play past the trash. You share, you collaborate. Go, like you mentioned, Mark Doble's an innovator. I would pick up and fly to Raleigh and go talk to that guy, he'll share the world with you. I'm interested to see what the community can do over the next couple of years, because it's really been impacted over the last year or so. How, what works, what's bullshit, what's not. Like I love how you guys come together, and I would like to see that grow.
For sure. So Corey, let's talk about where the rubber meets the road with Brightly software, and then how the software that you all have built works within this kind of context to help brewers make better decisions about maintenance and repairs.
It's a good question. And I've kind of struggled with this over the years just because there's not a ton of different software categories, especially for smaller breweries. There's really only like one, right? It's a brewery management system. And it's a little bit of a blend of a POS as well as the ingredients and materials and the batch recipe and all that, right? I think we're a complement. Bobby gets this. We have those type of tools, and they're a little bit more niche, and they're broken off into 3 or 4 different versions in industrial. But you'll have like the enterprise resource planning solution. You'll have what they call the manufacturing execution, right? Which is the recipe and the work order to put that, and the track and trace. They all tell a story about that beer and how the beer came about and when was it made and what was the environmental condition and all that. But no one's collecting information about the equipment. So you talked about Sierra Nevada and the Alpha Laval stuff, and it's like they know they are diehard for that brand, for that certain piece of equipment, because it performs its intended function almost no matter what they throw at it. There are brewers listening to this right now that have a piece of equipment, no matter what they do to it, it will not stay up to par with what they expect, right? So then the question is, when you go back to buy a new one, what is driving that investment decision? Are you buying new, or are you buying in a liquidation, which is unfortunate, but you can get some pretty good deals? But like, how are you choosing what you buy? Are you just buying what's the cheapest? And sometimes you get what you pay for, but that's where you have to take a data-driven approach. So the question is, take your most critical equipment, start tracking some level. I don't care if it's in a Google Drive, right? Find some way to track the repairs and the issues and the root cause of what's happening. From a business perspective, start tracking how much money you're putting into it. That tells you whether 5 years into a 20-year design, this thing is going to keep up or it's not. And that's the only way you can stay ahead and be proactive in managing your business, not just in managing equipment. That's what we did, right? You define the equipment, you define what you're going to do to try and maintain it, and then you also track the repairs. And in those repairs, you can track the cost inputs as well as material inputs, service contracts, XYZ, right? It takes the weight off of a brewer, especially a non-technical brewer who already has the weight of the world of trying to learn how to perfect the beer and the consistency and the quality. It takes that weight off their shoulders. And with Highland, when we did the webinar a little while back, right? Ben was like, we could not manage this with just 2 people if we didn't have a system. So again, like, it's just freeing them of the mundane and the admin work, and lets them focus on putting their hands on equipment and being the experts that they are.
How does that actually work then? So you input each of the pieces of equipment that you have. You create an inventory, and then like creating simplified systems. I always think about this as a brewery, because you can build a very, very thorough system, but everybody's busy, right? And so a system is only as good as the information that you can input into it, and it's only as good, and people only input that information if it's easy,
and if they understand why they need to track it. Right? That's the beauty of, like, the smaller you are, the brewer, they're making all the decisions. They know exactly what information they're going to retain and what they're not. The bigger you get, the more these people stare and take how many readings when only, 6 of them or 12 of them result in an outcome. Like, that's how you get people just start like pencil whipping and, doing those things. So I do like to work backwards. So from a business, what are you trying to achieve over the next year, 3 years, right? And if it's increasing margins, if it's increasing whatever it is, work backwards from that. And then when you get to the equipment, all right, what do I need to track around this equipment that helps me measure my performance and my ability to grow the business? So for some people, it's just a lot of these CMMSs like ours, you can just be mobile. How many brewers have a phone in their pocket, right? When the equipment breaks, they're definitely taking their phone out, taking a picture, and they're texting it to their buddy, and they're saying, hey, what's wrong? What should I check? Like, look up the history. Like, have your own history in a consolidated place of what you did. Did I fix that issue 2 months ago? And if so, what did I do to fix it? 2 months is a long time at certain points of the year, and other points of the year, it's like it just happened yesterday. But yeah, so meet them where they're at and understand, why are we tracking the information we do? You don't have to track, anything and everything. We don't force people to track things that they don't care about. Like, you can simplify it as much as you want, but we can also support, the Sierra Nevadas of the world and the big beer companies that do want a little bit more detail, because they have more people asking for information than just the brewer who wants to go back through a history.
Well, you got a giant problem on your hands if you're trying to track all the equipment at Sierra Nevada, because they're just tents and tents full of all the surplus equipment that they also have waiting in the wings just in case.
We all have a boneyard or a graveyard, or whatever we call it. The funny thing is, when a new boss comes in and they don't like that sitting on hand and they decide to get rid of it, or they override the engineer's decision when the engineer's fighting to keep it and they decide to get rid of it, and then the failure actually happens and they're like, well, if I had it, we'd be good. I've seen that play out a few times.
Yeah. No, but those smart brewers get out ahead of it and know exactly what they need. They also, you also have to keep an eye on what, how quickly you can get these things. There are some companies that will be able to get you a replacement part overnight. There are certainly a number of breweries with systems potentially built overseas where they are not, those replacement parts may not be as easy to find. We always coach folks, like, think about that. You might be able to save some money on some of this equipment, but how quickly are they going to, is this company that you're working with, are they keeping those spares in place? Can they get them to you fast? And then if they can't, how much do you need to then be holding so that you are not going to be unproductive for a week while you wait for something to get shipped over here?
Yeah, we deal with that a lot. We do a lot of service jobs where, somebody built some brewing equipment in Canada or Italy or somewhere, and they don't exist anymore. They don't even know who they called, or the brew house has been sold 2 or 3 times. We're seeing a big uptick where, we're coming in and just gutting the control panels, putting new control panels that you can get parts anywhere in the U.S. You'll have a good set of electrical prints for electrician to troubleshoot. Usually don't even have a set of drawings or schematics for their system, and then software that you own. Like, we'll hand you the software, so if you find a guy up the road that can make a change for you, good, you own it, it's yours. And we've leveraged the Brewhouse software from Siemens to make that entry go fast, because Siemens 50 years of building a brewery software, they've refined it and got it affordable now, where we can get to market pretty quick.
And I mean, on the CMMS side, Jamie, you talked about the asset inventory, right? Or the fixed equipment inventories that accountants will start to beat on you about. But then you got the spare parts, like the consumables and the items, and those tracking. The smaller you are, the more you have this kind of network. Like you said, anyone with an engineering background, you'll be familiar with this term of reliability-centered maintenance. In the 60s, when aircrafts were flying out of the sky and Congress commissioned United Airlines study, the Nolan and Heap study, they defined this principle of reliability-centered maintenance. And it was a very risk-based approach to things. So there's 7 questions you go through. One of the final questions is, what's the contingency plan? And I touched on it earlier. Like, that's the question. You don't need to have a proactive approach to everything in the sense of, well, we have active schedules or active contracts. It's just a simple exercise you go through as a business every few years of, hey, if this happens, who do I go to? What is the availability of this? Is it overseas? Is there an alternative? And what decision am I going to make as a business? And then a way to document that, because you may turn over brewers. You may start to scale the business if you're fortunate and, you put your right bets where they were. So you have that. And again, right now you're seeing the collectives and the consolidations in the beer space as well, which I think is the natural progression. And I love to see it because it's obviously better than brands just shutting down. But with that, now you have this central management function taking over, maybe shutting down production, maybe consolidating production. You want to see what you have and is it compatible? And if you don't have a way to track that, like, somebody's got to go boots on the ground and write down on a clipboard what it is and then take it back and is just have these systems. The systems just make it so much easier and so much less painful for people to find this information.
100%. Well, if you were trying to, coach a brewery thinking about taking this step in terms of, getting more efficiency out of their current systems, building some more integration there, moving from their siloed, kind of controller-based systems into a more kind of unified system, and then being able to use some of that. What would be your first steps? What would you coach people on, Bobby?
Yeah, look for someone that is part of an ecosystem that can answer more than just one solution, because you kind of tie your hands. Look for a manufacturer, look for a product, look for a services provider that has, can touch the front and the back of the business for you. Consider that. Look for consultative selling. Really lean into who will consult me instead of just selling me, is what I'm saying. As well as there's a lot of opportunities out there to do test runs. Like leaning into Corey's group to if you don't know, it's okay to not know where your pain points are. Let them come in and just go to the whiteboard and figure it out. You can leverage thousands of different people's problems, without having to be the use case. That's what I would say is just there's a lot of resources out there to do it, and you can never do anything until you start. So you just got to start somewhere.
Sure. Corey, if you were coaching breweries on where to go next as they're thinking about building a better system for controlling their maintenance and equipment inventory and SOPs and everything else, what's the first step they should take?
And the first step is they really have to think honestly about, why are we doing this, right? Is it just something we heard, or is it something we understand? Is it a pressing issue? Is it just we think we should be doing this? So like I said, hey, what is your 3 or 5 year plan? Where do you want the business to be, and how are you going to measure that? And you kind of work backwards, right? And you just need to ask the tough questions and realize you don't have to do everything. Just pick one thing. Like Bobby said, think big, start small, fail fast, but also have an open perspective. And if I could just say one thing, it's talk to other brewers. That is, I think you solve 90% of your problems. Half the time I catch myself asking, someone for advice, whether it's life or professional wise. And half the time I'm like, that's great to ask, but just figure it out. Just try it. Do something. Incremental success is better than delayed perfection.
Well, there you go. I think this is a great place to bring it to a close. Bobby, Corey, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. And thanks, of course, to Brightly Software, a Siemens company based in Raleigh, North Carolina, who helps organizations manage their assets, facilities, and infrastructure throughout their entire lifespan. For over 25 years, Brightly Software has been the global leader in intelligent cloud-based asset management solutions. With excellent training, support, and services, over 12,000 clients globally rely on Brightly to improve their teams, operations, and planning, and of course, a whole bunch of breweries in that mix. Bobby, if people want to learn more about your business, Think-PLC, where can they learn more about you?
Think-PLC.com. Check us out on LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. See us at a local trade show or hanging out of a control panel somewhere. Jokingly, no, we're just a phone call away if you're down. Check us out.
Sounds good. And Corey, if people want to take some next steps and learn more about Brightly Software, what should they do?
Similar to Bobby, there's obviously a website, so brightlysoftware.com. On most social media accounts as well. I'm on social media, specifically LinkedIn. Whether it's CBC or the local North Carolina Brewers Guild, you can catch us there. Just reach out or find me at one of these local Raleigh breweries. We got tons of them.
Sounds good. Anyway, Bobby, Corey, thanks so much for talking with me. Cheers.
Right on. Thanks, Jamie.
Cheers, guys.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.